Good morning and welcome to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter, the show that takes a look at the events and what's happening all around Putnam County, as well as interviews with local, community, and business leaders. And now, sharing his insights and experience, here's Today in Putnam County with County Mayor Randy Porter.
Thanks, Philip Gibbons, and thank you for joining us today. Hope you're having a great weekend. This week's show, it's about tourism and miracles. My guest this week is Shan Stout. She's our Visitors Bureau and Tourism Director. Good morning, Shan.
Hi, Mayor Porter. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. When I heard your story the other day when we were talking, I just knew I had to have you on the show and tell this story. And I know folks are thinking, well, what do miracles and tourism have to do with each other? But every day in tourism, we have miracles, don't we?
Every single day.
Getting ball teams to come when you don't think they're going to come for events and all this kind of stuff.
Praying it doesn't rain.
Yes, it's all kinds of things. But if you know Shan personally, you probably already know what we're going to talk about today. But if you don't, you're in for a heartwarming story on today's show. Shan is our Director of Tourism and Visitors Bureau here in Putnam County. She does a fantastic job, and we've seen a huge increase in tourism in our area in the past few years, and that's because of Shan and her great team that she's put together. On a day-to-day basis, Shan works to bring people and events to our county, and that brings in sales tax and hotel-motel tax, which helps keep our property taxes low. But if you don't know Shan very well, except for the grace of God, there almost wasn't a Shan Stout, and today you're going to hear one of the most heartwarming miracle stories I think I ever heard. So, Shan, let's get started. Let's start with your mom and dad and how this all began back many years ago.
Many years ago.
I didn't mean that way.
I'm not a young little chicken anymore, Mayor.
I think of you as.
So, many years ago, before I was ever born, my parents, I truly owe my story specifically to my mother. In a way, she saved my life. So here's the way it went down. My mom and dad were, when they first got married, they were living with my dad's mom. And my dad was at work, and my mom and her mother-in-law were at home, and they went to bed, and the house caught fire.
Oh, wow.
So it's one of those devastating stories where my mother at the time, she was 5.5 months pregnant with me. So she was expecting a baby, and she's in this house fire. And my dad came home and found the house up in flames. My grandmother did not make it through the fire. So it was, when I said it was a house fire, it was a very bad house fire. So this starts out as a sad story.
Right.
And my mother had to jump from a 2-story window to save her life. My dad, you hear about adrenaline and when people are in trauma. My dad pulled the window out of the bricks trying to save my mom and his mom from that fire.
Wow.
And so it was very tragic. And then this resulted in my mom miscarrying.
Oh.
So she had lost the baby and she was hysterical. And the doctor just told her she just needed to calm down. She's been through this trauma. She's not well. And my mother insisted the doctor do everything he could to save my life. And the doctor's explaining, you've lost the baby. I'm so sorry. You just need to say goodbye. You need to understand that, we need to make you okay. And my mother insisted. And she said, I'm not going to calm down until you do everything you can. The doctor, now just to appease my mother.
You're 5.5 months though, right?
Yes, absolutely. Gave me mouth to mouth through a straw and resuscitated me. And he said, now listen, she is so underdeveloped. I had no fingers and toes. I had half a lung. I was in bad little misdeveloped shape. I was underdeveloped even for the 5.5 months that I was. And so he gave me mouth to mouth through a straw because I was so very tiny. And he said, you need to use this time to say goodbye.
Because most babies don't. I
was already gone.
Yeah.
He brought me back. I'm so underdeveloped.
Yeah.
And he said, but listen, I'll make you a promise. If she lives to the morning, I'll send her to Vanderbilt. And I did. And he kept his word, and he sent me to Vanderbilt. Now, I was
5.5 months, Shan.
I was in Vanderbilt a very long time. Now, you have to understand, I had no retinas. I was completely blind. And they said, due to the fact that I was so underdeveloped, I would very likely be mentally handicapped. I would have some serious long-term disabilities going on. And of course, the blindness on top of all of that. And my mother just prayed and prayed and prayed. And there she was with this little underdeveloped blind baby. And when she finally got to take me home, of course, I didn't respond to lights or television or anything. I mean, I was just blind.
You're totally blind. So here you are. We're talking with Shan Stout this morning. She's our director of the Visitors Bureau and Tourism here in Putnam County. She has a great miracle story that we're talking about of how Shan's mom was in a house fire. Shan, at 5.5 months, was delivered, and how she made it. You're in Vanderbilt for a long time, though, right?
Very long time. The medical bills were insurmountable. I don't know how many houses my parents could have bought for what they had to pay for
medical bills.
And so when my mom finally brought me home.
But you got to go home, though.
I got to go home. And then she eventually has this small little toddler starting to crawl around and bump into things. Well, the doctors had heard that there was a surgery they could do where possibly you could see shadows, and it was like sending notes to your brain, kind of, you were going to be like a bat, a bat will send kind of sonar out, and your brain was going to be able to perceive shadows, and that way I at least would be able to not bump into door jambs and tables and all of those things. But it was very dangerous, and I was very, very young, so they ran all these tests, and it wound up they didn't think I was really going to be able to be a candidate because I was just completely blind. Like, there was no chance. The retinas just weren't there. And they said, let's run one more test, and this is kind of a Hail Mary. This is the last-ditch effort to see if we can do this.
Think of all the miracles you've already got, okay?
Oh, yes.
Your mother survived jumping out of the fire.
Yes.
You survived just being born at 5.5 months, and
then all the development
and everything. Yes. And here you are, you're at your parents' home, you're blind, but you're growing as a toddler, right?
Yes, I was learning to talk. I mean, all the things that a child does except for see. And so my mom, she tells the story that she was in the doctor's office, and they have you, they always had you wait in the waiting room, and then they, took the child back. Well, the doctor came out in the waiting room after a little bit and said, I need to talk to you. And she's like, oh no.
She just knew it was going to be bad, right?
Yes, the test didn't come through right, and she's not a candidate. She was just waiting for the bad news. And he said, Shan, tell us what you see. And they stuck my head in a little viewfinder, and I didn't say anything. And he goes, I'm going to leave the room. And he left the room, and I turned to my mom, and I said, that was a Christmas tree. My mom's like, what? So she looked in the viewfinder, and it was a little black and white silhouette of a tree.
Miracle number 4.
Yes. And my mom goes, you know what? She heard the nurse talking. Like, I mean, why would she even know what a Christmas tree is? And it was December at the time.
Yeah, because you'd never seen a Christmas tree.
Never seen a Christmas tree. So it's like she just heard the nurse. She's just parroting what she's heard someone say. So we go home that afternoon, and my mom's pretty mad at the doctor because it gave her false hope, and I'm upset, So she was sewing a button on my dad's shirt, and she dropped a needle in the orange shag carpet that we had in the 70s. You remember that carpet?
Oh, we all had that carpet, didn't we? It was either orange or some lime green.
Some red.
Some red, yeah.
Yes, it was some crazy carpet. So imagine dropping a needle. It's literally a needle in a haystack of carpet. And Mom goes, oh no, I have to find that needle. Shan's going to crawl on top of it, and I've got to find it. So she's crawling around on the floor, just looking for that needle, rubbing her hands across the carpet. And I crawled over, picked up the needle, and I handed it to her.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't even know what to do. She knew at that moment that I not only could see,
but I
could see better than her. I found that needle and gave it to her, and that was that. And I have been able to see ever since. I gave my testimony years ago, and a lady raised her hand after it was all over, and I called on her, and she goes, can you see now? So I want to clarify there. I can see now.
You can. Well, now, folks, some may argue with who you married, okay?
That's true. Even Sam says, if her eyesight ever comes back, I'm in real trouble.
Sam, I'm just kidding. Shannon's married to Shan Stout, one of our local realtors here, and I give him a hard time all the time. Hey, we got to take a break. We got to finish this story, though. We're talking with Shan Stout. She is the Director of Tourism and Visitors Bureau here in Putnam County, and you're listening to a great bunch of miracles that happened to Shan that only by the grace of God is she here today, and I wanted to make sure that we shared that with you and you be able to hear it, because sometimes all we hear is the bad stuff. Stout, she's the director of our Visitors Bureau and Tourism here in Putnam County, does a great job. It's been amazing at what she's been able to do over the last few years with our tourism department, bringing folks into our county, all kinds of events and so forth. Folks, that's what helps keeps our property taxes low here in Putnam County, bringing in all those extra sales tax and hotel, motel tax. If you don't know Shan, she has a remarkable story of multiple miracles in her life that when you hear it, it's just almost seems impossible that she's even here today, but she is, thanks to the grace of God. We've been talking about those miracles. We started out with her mom and dad and her mom getting pregnant, and then there being a house fire, and her mom jumped out of the house to save herself. Shan was only 5.5 months when she was delivered, spent many, many days in Vanderbilt Hospital not thinking that she would be able to make it. She did. She was blind, wound up, God healed her of that and able to see, and we're going to pick up there, Shan, going up, and the miracles just didn't cease. They kept going even after you were gaining your eyesight, right?
Well, I think it's something to when God saves you from an impending doom of any kind. You know, if first off, he saved my life because I was so underdeveloped and I was just a miscarriage that was resuscitated and lived, and then was blind and then restored my sight. And so first off, I was a born fighter.
Yes.
I mean, you know, so impossible things seem probable to me just by my nature.
Right.
And then my mother always said, you know, God has saved you for a great purpose. And a lot of moms will say that to their kids, and it's true. It's
well,
true.
You were,
absolutely.
though. Yeah, it was absolutely true.
But I firmly believed that. And then when I was 4 years old, I told my parents something that they found adorable. I came to them and said, God told me I was going to be published before I turned 20. Well, my mom was like, you don't even know what published means.
Where'd you get that word at?
That's such a big word. You know. So then I was like a sideshow act to my entire extended family. It's like, tell them what God told you. Tell them what God told you. And I'd be like, God says I'm going to be published before I turn 20. So this went on for a long time. Well, as I got older, you know, and I'm a teenager, I still felt that calling that was my life path.
Yeah.
And my mom starts to get worried because, you know, starving artists, that's a thing. And she's like, oh my gosh, she can't be serious about this. Like, you know, we're
what's she
from a small
do?
town.
Yeah.
You know,
how's she gonna make it?
Yes. Yeah. What is she gonna do? And so she would start, well, we need to get a practical path for you, you know. So my senior year of high school took a zippy and unexpected twist, and my dad moved us back to his hometown of Dowelltown. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's like 200 people and 1,000 cows. That is what Dowelltown is. There's no town.
No.
There's a post office. That's it. And I was like, oh my goodness, like how is God going to make this happen? And God is good,
Amen.
and God is creative,
Amen.
and he gets us on the road he wants us to be on, even if we think it's the wrong road and we think we need to tell God, hey, God, in case you need a heads up here.
I need to change this a little bit.
I think you got me on the wrong path, but God knows what he's doing every single time. And my path led me to take my grandmother to the chiropractor one day. And when I got there, you know, I'm this teenage kid in high school, and I'm like, taking my grandmother to the chiropractor, you know, I'm willing to do it. But you sit there for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So then I get there and they're like, you're going to come back like every Thursday for the next 8 weeks. And I was like, gosh, you know, so I was like, okay. So I'm taking grandma to the chiropractor. So while I would be in the chiropractic office, I'd be drawing on a notepad to give me something to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, the chiropractor was bored because they'd have to do heat and cold and heat and cold. So all this time waiting. And he'd come out and talk to me, and he's like, so you like to draw? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's just a hobby of mine. He's like, how do you feel about children's books? I was like, well, I haven't really thought about it. I mean, you know, it's not really my thing, but why do you ask? And he goes, well, I have this friend. Well, you know, everybody has a friend that wants somebody to draw the book and blah, blah, blah. Well, it winds up that his friend was the #1 country music singer in the nation at the time. And that was Ricky Van Shelton.
Oh,
so if anybody's
wow.
a country music fan,
yes.
Ricky had written a children's book and could not find an illustrator to do it that was not a super fan. Well, I didn't listen to country music. I was a classical pianist. So country music was not on my radar. I didn't know who he was. So he was like, I have this friend, you know, his name's Ricky.
You said, yeah, Ricky.
Well, I mean, it didn't mean anything.
Who is that? Yeah.
So the chiropractor said, if you will meet with him, I'll never bother you about this again. But I really think you'd be a good fit for him, because obviously what I didn't know is he knew that I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
So I met with Ricky, and I thought he was from the rodeo because he came in with a big cowboy hat and a big buckle, you know, and cowboy boots. I mean, he was all decked out in his Wranglers, and I thought, gosh, this man takes Tennessee seriously. Like, I had no idea. And he's like, hi, I'm Ricky Van Shelton. It's nice to meet you. You know, I've written this book, blah, 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 Tales from a Duck Named Quacker. And I was like, this rodeo man's written a book about a duck. I mean, the whole thing was hilarious to me. And he hired me to do that book. Well, I was 19 years old, and that first book hit our first bookstore, Davis Kid Booksellers, and all the news channels were there, and Ricky was there. We were doing our first book signing, and my mom and I were standing outside the store before the media was going to escort us in, and she looked at that window, which had like 100 copies of our book, and she said, "How old are you?" And I said, 19. You're my mom. You should know this. And she goes, "How old are you about to be?" And I said, 20.
It hit you, didn't it?
It hit us so heavy, we both started to cry. I had long forgotten about God telling me that. I had given up.
Yeah.
God doesn't give up.
No.
God knows. That's why he's not worried about our path. He sees the end of our path. He sees the beginning of our path, and he sees the middle. And we stood there, and we just started to sob.
Another miracle.
It was another miracle. And then God did the most miraculous thing, because it wasn't about the book at all, because that book hit the bestsellers list, followed by a second, followed by a third, followed by multiple other books and projects.
All of a sudden, you're a best-selling...
I am, at this time, the youngest children's book illustrator on the bestsellers list.
Wow.
I went on a speaking circuit for 11 years, talking to thousands of educators, talking to thousands of children, going in schools. It was amazing. I was on Good Morning America 6 times, multiple opportunities, every news channel on planet Earth across America that is at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have to be there. I've been on all of them. But I was able to give my testimony completely unfettered because people wanted to hear what I had to say.
To millions of people, Shan, when you start thinking about it, sometimes if we can give our testimony to just a few people, a few hundred people, but God opened a door there for you to be on Good Morning America 6 times, talking to all these thousands of educators. I mean, you're hitting millions of people that are captivated by your story, but at the same time, you're giving your testimony to them that they were getting both.
They're a captive audience.
Yeah.
I mean, the fan mail that came with people saying how they were impacted by it. I had never, I mean, you would have thought I was Elvis. It was hilarious because the poor little postmaster in Dowelltown would have bags of mail and be like, "Shan, your mail's here. Do you want me to get a man to carry it out to your car?"
That is amazing.
And it was precious. It was precious. That's all I can say.
Folks, we're talking with Shan Stout. She is our Director of Tourism and Visitors Bureau here in Putnam County. Does a great job, but I want you to hear Shan's story. There it is, full of miracles from the time of a house fire when her mom was pregnant all the way through her whole life. Miracle after miracle of how God blessed her, and without the grace of God would not be here today. We're going to finish the rest of this. We're up to the point, Shan, that you've been on Good Morning America 6 times. You've been all over the country telling your story because you were a successful illustrator for children's books with Ricky Van Shelton, and you're getting all this media attention, but you're a witness. You're witnessing, giving your story about what God's done for you. But then comes the 700 Club, which I know we're all familiar with, heard about it, watched it. Tell us about where we moved to now with the 700 Club.
Well, I'd been giving my testimony across the United States. I was invited to go to China to speak to the International Reading Association, to 30,000 educators. So my story was getting around. So the 700 Club reached out and said, "Shan, would you be willing to give your testimony on our show?" And I was like, "Well, sure." And they said, "Well, here's the thing. We don't just let anybody come on and say any old thing on our show. We have to prove that if it truly is a miracle, we have to have it medically confirmed."
They wanted the data to back it up,
every
right?
piece of data. So we had to request all of my medical records from Vanderbilt. Now, I was in Vanderbilt for nearly a year, so that's a lot. They shipped 8 cases of medical records to my home.
Wow.
And then in turn, we had to digitally have those sent to the 700 Club. But for the first time, I got to see my medical records. And when I was first admitted to Vanderbilt, I was so underdeveloped, they didn't know what to call me. So they said the product responded this way today. The product responded that way today. The product has, had a turn for the worse, that sort of thing. It was so surreal to see how seriously, dire my condition was. I mean, it was just touch and go. And just to lay my hands on those medical records and all the doctors and nurses that had a hand in taking care of me.
Yeah.
And anyone could have given up on me. I mean, because I was a waste of their medical everything.
Your chances of survival were so slim.
Oh, yes. And my parents, I mean, the cost of it, everything. Anyone could have given up hope at any time. But my sweet mother, she never wavered.
gave up.
It was something. You know, I went on the 700 Club, and they flew me out there, and I gave my testimony. And even on my way there on the plane, I was sitting next to people, and we were in a blizzard. So it was a very dicey flight out there where they had to de-ice the wings over and over. And I gave my testimony to a couple of college kids who were sitting in the row beside me. And at one point, it was so scary on the plane because it was just, I mean,
you didn't think he's going to make it?
Yes. Yeah. That one of the college kids stood up and said, "Don't worry. Listen, this woman beside me is about to give her testimony on the 700 Club. God is not going to let this plane go down."
Isn't that great?
So it was precious. It was just, I don't know, that was just special and hilarious all at the same time, that they thought, well, you know, God may let me go down, but she's not going.
She's not going. There's another miracle there.
And it's just, I guess, one of the most heartfelt moments through the opportunity of being a children's book illustrator. I was invited, and Vanderbilt did not know this at the time, but they invited me to come to the children's ward at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital and visit with the children and bring my books. And I was able to then to share with the children, I was here when I was little. And
gave them
children,
hope, right?
You could see the hope. And the mothers would come out in the hall and say, "Thank you." Because if they lose hope, they lose strength. And we don't want them to give up. We need them to fight.
Wow.
And you've given them this hope. So to see that God placed all these pieces, you know, because people could say, "Oh, well, God let you do this or let you," a lot of extraordinary things. But there was a reason behind all of that.
Yes.
And it just, years later, even as my career advanced and I went into marketing, and that opened up a door for my local hospital.
Where'd you go? You're working for St. Thomas, right?
Yes. Then after I had retired from children's books, right? Because I had 11 long years touring the nation, and I wanted to sit still. And an opportunity to market my local hospital came up, and they said, "Shan, just give us a year. Just come in here and do it for a year. We know that you're not really doing anything." So I said, "Okay, 1 year. What's 1 year?" Well, 10 years later, I was still working for Ascension St. Thomas. And one day, I was walking down the hall, and one of my coworkers, who I'd known for years at this point, said, "Shan, I want to tell you something." I was like, "Okay, you know, how's it going, Rebecca?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, you know, you may not know this, but our material management crew, like, we all knew your grandma, my dad's mom, who died in the fire."
Yeah, in the house fire.
And I said, "You knew my grandma?" And they said, "Yes." I said, "She worked with us. And when your mom had you and you had to go to Vanderbilt and you were pitiful," they said, "We collected gas money every week and anonymously sent it to your mama so that she would not have to be burdened with worried about how," because she had to quit her job. She had to drive back and forth every day to Vanderbilt. So she was, you know, she was really struggling. And she said, "We never intended for her to know, but you're working here in our hospital."
Part of God's plan again.
Where your grandma used to walk these same halls, and we felt like you needed to know. And like, how humbling is that to even have that kind of overlap, to say that they were a part of my story, and I've been working with them for several years at this point.
And God put them there.
Right there.
To help with your grandmother, to make sure that all this took place and happened.
And so if people think, like, when you do a little bitty thing and you say, "Well, I'm only, you know, I just gave somebody dinner when they were grieving," or "I just, you know, gave them gas money to help them out while they're having a hard time," or "I just made a phone call to help their son get a job, you know, and I was just a character reference for somebody." It doesn't matter. You don't know how big that small piece can be.
Part of that plan.
And my mother needed that gas money the same as I needed my eyesight back.
Yep.
And so I'm not saying that God could not have made me the first blind children's book illustrator, but I really needed my eyesight. And this miracle has been something that I made a promise to God. Anyone who asked my story, I will share my testimony. And so, Mayor Porter, you asked, and here I am.
Hey, and I just think this is going to bless so many people that hear this, that we hear all the bad stuff and in the news today, and we need to hear some good stuff, Shan. And what a story, what a miracle story. But we got to take it, and we got to get you up to today. So you were with Ascension, with St. Thomas, and you went through COVID with St. Thomas.
Yes, I made it through the pandemic, and I actually volunteered my office to be the COVID call center where people would call and ask questions. And during that time, my my single little office line, because you're not set up for a call center in a hospital, I received 6,300 phone calls directly to my office. So all day long, I had people crying on the phone, asking all kinds of questions. So I became like the leading expert in whatever we knew about COVID at the time.
What little we did know about it.
What little we did know, it changed every day. And once I felt like we were on the uptick, the world was starting to feel like a safer place, I thought, I need to now turn my attention to a happier thing to market. And one of my friends in tourism said, Shan, I hear you're looking for a different job and you might want to be interested in tourism. And they told me about the opportunity for the director of tourism here for Putnam County. And I applied for it. And again, in a zippy and unexpected twist, they called me back. Shan, we appreciate your interview. You're a great candidate, but we just don't have the funds in place right now. I wish you the best. But then I got to have Christmas with my family and all of that. And when the New Year started in February, they called me back and said, how about that job? And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Shan, what an amazing story. And people think that miracles don't still happen. All they got to do is listen to the show and listen to your story about before your birth, if your mom even surviving the house fire to start with.
Oh, yes. And she could have just let me lay there.
Oh, yes.
And be a miscarriage.
I mean, your grandmother didn't survive, right?
No, she did not.
And so it's just miracles. So, folks, I wanted to bring that show to you today. I know it's maybe a little different than what we normally do on Today in Putnam County, but I just felt like after I heard Shan's story that you need to hear it too and bring some warmth to you and some good things. And we're blessed to have Shan here in our county. And Shan, tourism is just booming.
It is. It's more than I can handle right now, Mayor.
You're just such a blessing, and we appreciate what you do and everything here. Give a shout out to Wish You Were Here, though.
Oh, I was filming this morning at Triple C Ranch, and we are in season 3. Hoping for a wonderful season 4, and God is good with that as well. I mean, it blesses these tourism-based businesses and gives them a platform that is now airing across the United States and Canada on multiple PBS stations.
Isn't that great?
It's just been a beautiful journey.
What a blessing you have been, and what a story you've got of how God has taken you through and all the many opportunities that you've had. And I just want to say thank you for everything you do for us and for coming on today and telling your story.
What a pleasure.
Thanks, Shan. Hey, that's our show for this week. Hope you'll join us every weekend for Today in Putnam County here on all the Zimmer family of radio stations. I'm County Mayor Randy Porter. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and may God continue to bless Putnam County.
You've been listening to Today in Putnam County, hosted by Putnam County Mayor Randy Porter.